Simone, I thought that was a lot of thought that went into that. It was excellent. And Dr. Lynch, of course, you were the county executive when the Bayfront Highway first started back in 1989. And you're right, it did change in 1995 when Governor Ridge from ERIE became our governor. April, that was very informative. And I think, you know, people like you that have these type of organizations really need to have a seat at the table. I think you're absolutely right with it. I found it to be very fascinating. And of course, Sarah, I thought, you know, we are our water, right? That's who we are as a community. We are connected. Our whole identity is tied up with our water. What better way to spend our time and our money to preserve that water, especially for generations to come. I'm not sure what I can add to what has already been said. I think, you know, as you said, Dr. Lynch, you know, if it wasn't for PENNDOT building the Bayfront Parkway, then we would not have the amenities along the waterfront that we have. We wouldn't have that beautiful bike ride that I ran into you, Adam, from Penn State Barron, coming across the southern shore of our bay. So there are great amenities that have happened to that. And in many ways, that highway has brought also an opportunity for us to reinvent ourselves as a city. As we see the development of that waterfront in an extraordinary way, those of us who live, particularly in the urban core, ask ourselves, why can't we connect with that? And as we know, many years ago, there was a master plan, a comprehensive plan that was done by the city called ERIE Refocused. And it talked about these connections. Now, the Bayfront Parkway has brought many good things, but is it perfect? Absolutely not. We all know that, and even PENNDOT knows that. In fact, it's the glaring two problems that it was designed in a way that fostered people to drive too fast, that has left innumerable people injured and accidents, and have left dozens of people to die on our parkway. That's unacceptable. The other reason is that the parkway acts as a dangerous and very unpleasant barricade for those of us who want to walk across it, or anybody to walk across it. So for those two reasons, we asked PENNDOT to reconsider making improvements on that parkway, to reduce the speed, make it safe, and to allow the people that are living in the urban core to have access to the amenities that are right in front of us. But crossing that thoroughfare is just too dangerous and unpleasant. So we were very hopeful that when we read the reports, that they espoused the very essence of ERIE Refocus, which is core strengthening, to develop the core in a way that the heart is pulsating vitality throughout the community. This was very encouraging. Unfortunately, we don't always see that happening in our plan, but we do see that in the city. We took to heart what Buki has said: strengthen the core as we define it, the Bayfront, the downtown, our east and west neighborhoods. We see that happening today. The city has taken that very seriously. The Erie Downtown Development Corporation, for example, is pounding millions of dollars into a footprint along State Street and Fifth, trying to kind of recapture the glory of living downtown. This is a good testimony. Our West Bayfront has a wonderful plan, driven a lot by Gannon University, that's designed to reinvigorate that wonderful neighborhood on the East Bayfront. And it's happening, we can see it. And on our east side, in relationship to Erie Insurance and Best and Serve Erie, there's great improvements along that east, lower east side area with the flipping of the armory and you know, Erie Insurance trying to create housing for the consideration of their employees to live in the downtown. And that to me is ultimately the goal here. How do we create a downtown, an urban core that is vibrant and that attracts all different types of people to consider to live in the urban core, and to create a density that is a prerequisite for rejuvenation? we don't need just to become an evening college night. We don't need just to become a workplace. We need people, diverse people, to live in the urban core. And as I pointed out, that's happening. What's not happening, and we can clearly see, and I think this is why we're here, is that we don't see those connections. I beg your pardon?
Why y'all throwing that stuff in the creek?
So we don't see these connections between the downtown and the waterfront in a way that that the master plan asked for. So what I'd like to do is just spend a couple minutes looking very carefully at what they are proposing, what PENNDOT is proposing. And I think a lot of it is on the right track and a lot of it is not on the right track. My question is, if we look at the Bayfront Parkway, we can identify that by their own numbers, that the high mortality rate happens in, as you pointed out, Simone, on the East Bayfront Parkway. It happens around 12th Street down to about 6th Street. This is the highest mortality rate of people dying on our highway or our parkway. And incidentally, that strip of the highway came 6 years later than the west side of the parkway. So it's actually more fatalities in a shorter period of time. And if we look to the western part of our Bayfront connector, by Green Garden and Lincoln and West 8th, we see almost the second highest mortality rate. So if indeed the roundabouts, which are scheduled to be dual lanes, which is the size of about a football field, profess to actually, and they do, reduce mortality rate in crashes up to 70%, why wouldn't we consider moving these Bayfront or these roundabouts to the areas in which we have the high mortality rate? This is a serious question. So we know that in our plan, Buki calls for an iconic connection, and PENNDOT's going to spend up to $21 to $22 million at State Street by having the parkway run north-south underneath it and State Street over it. I think we can all agree that it's not going to be an iconic connection, but it is a very utilitarian and by and large not a bad idea. And I think we all can agree with that, right? I think generally speaking. So you have your two Bayfront, you have your two roundabouts in an area where, quite frankly, you're not going to have the crashes that are statistically recorded there right now. In fact, State Street is considered one of the highest spots of crashes in the past 5 years. There's been 40 crashes there. If we don't have a stoplight there, the crashes will be essentially eliminated unless you're on top. And two, you won't have that idle time that causes that congestion. So my question is, and I think this ties into why we need to have a little bit more discussion about where that plan is. Is there a possibility where we could take those Bayfront or those roundabouts and move them into areas where they need to be, and then create pedestrian overpasses at Holland, and if necessary at Sassafras, or even further down, preferably in Cherry or Lincoln, or I'm sorry, or Liberty Street to connect into Liberty Park. So that these are a little bit more in the weeds question, but I think it's worth consideration to think about what would that parkway look like if the roundabouts weren't there, or they were in areas where the higher mortality rate was, and it was a slower parkway, one that wasn't such a threat to people to cross them. Then I think we start to look at the perspective of, if we can land these Bayfront, these pedestrian bridges in these neighborhoods, it provides an incentive for that neighborhood to take advantage of the amenities along the waterfront. And that would actually increase the idea of investing in these neighborhoods, because families want to, people want to have connection with our water. It's right in front of us. We need to have access to enjoy that. You know, in some ways, PENNDOT's in a really tough position. We've asked them to fix the problems of a fast highway, and I think they're addressing it. And we can agree with that. We've also asked them to give us an iconic connection with very little resources. So what I mean by that is ERIE has not stepped up to participate in this. There's no skin in the game, in a sense. Whether it's county, city government, whether it's our businesses, whether it's our institution of learning or higher ed, we really have not stepped up and said, PENNDOT, we would like to have something, some sort of an iconic connection that would be a a civic pride kind of thing, and that we're really to have skin in the game in this. We haven't done that. So in some ways, it's difficult for PENNDOT in their situation. However, as was identified before, perhaps through a series of connections along the parkway and the beautification of it and attracting pedestrians and bikers along the parkway, that in itself becomes the iconic connection that we all can be proud of.